Our next presenter is Mr. Stephen Hulbert. Stephen is a national presenter at workshops, conferences, schools, and clubs about addiction and recovery. Currently, he has 19 plus years of continuous sobriety and is actively involved in a 12-step program. Please help me welcome Stephen to the podium.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody that helped put this together. It's an honor and a great opportunity to come up here to speak with everybody that's here, the various people that represent all aspects of the problem and the elephant that we're talking about today. I want to just real quickly just say that the women that were just up here, they had a lot of great things to talk about and a lot of great things that they're working on. When I first got sober, things have changed a lot, okay? And what the judge was speaking about, these are really first world problems, okay? 20 years ago, the people that came in and got sober, they were dying, okay? And so now we're bringing the bottom up, okay? This sober life doesn't make sense to anybody that's using. Okay? So when you go to talk to somebody about getting sober and about what your life can be, it doesn't make any sense. The only way, you have to live it to believe it. Okay? And so when I first got sober, the people that really put their heart into turning their lives around did so because they had no other place to go, right? Their backs were against the wall. They were going to die. And so really the only way to bring the bottom up is to force them, literally force them with the court system to get involved in doing things that they don't want to do. I know drug court is a hassle, right, for people that come in, right? And so the addict 20 years ago and the alcoholic did all the work for the court system, right? They put themselves in a corner where they had nowhere else to go, and now the court has to artificially create that environment for them. And so the amount of work that it takes is even greater than the alcoholic and drug addict destroying themselves. And so I really want to applaud the things that we have in place today to bring the bottom up, to try to prevent people from going to the depths that others have to go to. And it does take a lot of resources. It does take a lot of resources. And so whatever the community can do to support raising the bottom for people so they don't have to have such a dramatic effect on themselves and their family, it definitely needs to be supported as much as possible, because what we're really lacking today is a sense of community. That's the biggest problem, and that's one of the things I want to focus on today. Okay. So I'm up here to tell you my story about what it was like being an alcoholic and a drug addict, what happened to me, how I got better, and what some of my feedback is about some of the successes and failures that I had. Well, let me tell you about the stigma a little bit of substance abuse. I was at the top of my class in high school. I got voted into the Ohio High School National Football Hall of Fame. I had full ride scholarships to just about any university I wanted to go to. I got to study at places like Harvard and Duke. I became a molecular neuropharmacologist, and I worked at Eli Lilly. And I had life by the short hairs. And despite all the awards and accolades that I had attained in my early adulthood. I became a drug addict and an alcoholic. And just over 20 years ago, I was drunk behind the wheel, and I hit a guy head on and killed him and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. But how'd that happen? How'd that happen? I started drinking. I remember going to CYO dances when I was like 13 years old, and we used to go to them. I went to a little high school over in Ohio called Hicksville, Ohio. And our little Catholic church would have some CYO dances. And I remember walking up to probably the prettiest girl in the school. Back then, everybody was really nervous. I always had really high, lofty goals, right? So I walked up. The boys were over here. The girls were over there. And I walked up to Julie, and I asked Julie if she'd wanted to dance. And she was with all of her friends. And she just laughed at me and said, "Are you kidding me?" And I put my tail between my legs, and I put my head down, and I was just devastated by that rejection. In front of all my friends, in front of all of her friends. And I went home, and I didn't go back to that dance for quite a while. But then a couple months later, I had a friend that had some older siblings, and he's like, "Hey, let's get together and have some alcohol and have some drinks, right, before we go to the dance." And I'm like, "Sure, let's go." I'd never really drank that much. You know, I maybe had a sip of beer or whatever. And we got drunk on Mad Dog. Oh, horrible stuff. And we went in there, and we were drunk, and I was feeling great. And I walked up to Julie, and I asked her to dance. And of course, she said no. But I felt bad for her. She didn't realize what she was missing out on, what type of great time we were going to have. And I just moved on to the next one. And at that moment, I realized that this is the way that I wanted to feel for the rest of my life. I felt comfortable in my own skin. People thought I was funny, right? I was a lot more relaxed. I could talk to anybody I wanted to. People laughed at my jokes. And I chased that feeling for a very long time. I played sports all through high school, and we didn't drink a lot. We drank some, in high school, like people did in the late 80s and early 90s. But then I went to college, and it immediately became clear that I like to drink quite a bit, and I drank a little bit more than most people. And as a result of that, I joined a fraternity, and they thought that I should be the social chair of the fraternity because I like to party. And we had about 100 guys in our fraternity, and the social dues were $500 a semester at our fraternity. And it just went into a checking account. So that means every 3 months I had $50,000 to spend to make sure that me and my friends had a good time. That's a lot of money to blow, right? And my drinking started to take off. Well, my whole life I was told that I was pretty smart and I was going to be a doctor, and so I studied really, really hard. But as a result of the drinking and pot smoking and going to a lot of fish shows and taking too much acid, and that my grades started to go down a little bit. I don't know if you know what it takes to get into medical school, but you pretty much have to have straight A's. And I had mostly A's and a couple of B's. And so I was devastated when I found out that I didn't get into medical school, and my alcoholism and just really started to take off. So I didn't know what to do since I didn't get in medical school. So being a professional student, I decided to go to graduate school and thought, that might be a good solution. And so I just wasn't very happy with where my life was turning out. And we all know, right, that temporarily drinking and drugs is a great answer for that. And I don't know really where it happened, but at some point I crossed that imaginary line, right? I crossed a line in the sand that I didn't know was there. So at that time, I had met a young lady, and we started dating, and we ended up getting married. And not too long after that, she said she was pregnant. And I came home from work one day, and she was crying when I came home from work, which wasn't unusual in my house, right? Because who knows what the hell I was doing last night or where I was at. And I asked her what was wrong, and she said she was pregnant, and she didn't really know if what that really meant. And she was scared to death. She said she was scared to death to have a baby with somebody like me. And that was just devastating. So it was probably a year or two before that. I was at a bar, and we were drinking. And the bar closed early. It was like a professionals bar that closed at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night in downtown Indianapolis. I was working then at Eli Lilly, and we would go to this bar, and when the bar closed at 8 or 9, I was a regular there. The bartender would just lock the doors and shut up the bar, and I was allowed to sit in there while they cleaned up and had a few extra drinks, you know, and I was just sort of part of their club. And I remember the cook came out and said, "Here, try this." We'd always smoke some dope in there and shit. But he said, "Here, try this." And I was wasted. I used to really love to drink Jack Daniels. And I didn't know what it was. I put it in my mouth and I hit it, and it was my first hit of crack cocaine. And man, that feeling I got, that euphoria, right? It was the same feeling I got the first time I ever rode on a big roller coaster. It was the same feeling I got the first time I kissed a girl. It was the same feeling that I got when something really exciting or really powerful happened. And it was in this little thing right here, and I could do it over and over and over and over again. And man, the next day I knew that was bad. I knew that I was probably in trouble, and I just made a decision that I wasn't going to do that again. And probably a couple of weeks later, back at the same bar, I did it again. And then I did it again. And I don't really know, how much money you really need to make to smoke crack cocaine, but I know that nobody in here has enough money, because it started to devastate me. And it started to have a really big impact on my life. And not really knowing anything about sobriety. I mean, I was struggling with my alcoholism, and there was a lot of problems, but that really brought me to my knees quick. And so I just made a decision. I knew that if I never drank again, I would never smoke crack cocaine ever again. So as a result of that, I'm just going to quit drinking. And so I just made a decision that I was done. And I had no idea the next day I was drunk. And I come home, and my wife's pregnant. And I was like, I don't know what happened. I just made this plea, right? And she's going to leave me, right? We're going to get divorced. My back was against the wall. And so I knew that whatever happened last night was the very last time that was ever going to happen. I knew that I was done drinking, right? And I was excited to be a parent. I was really excited. I'm not a bad guy. And I really wanted to be a father. And as I was making my pleas and as I was convincing myself that last night was the very last night I was ever going to drink or ever get high again, I started to get really excited about it. Oh my God, my life's going to turn around. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to love my kid and raise him. And I started to have all this hope and every neuron in my body was just firing with excitement. And I knew I was at the precipice of turning my life around, and life was going to get a lot better. Crocodile tears coming down my face, snot bubbles coming out my nose. I was excited, and life was going to be better, man. I knew it. And the next day, I was drunk again. We all know that story. Anybody here that's ever suffered from it knows it. And it absolutely blew my mind that I decided I was going to do something, and I couldn't do it. I checked myself into a treatment center, and either the day I left or the day after I left, after being in there for 30 days, I was drunk and high. I just couldn't figure it out. I went to meetings, started figuring out going to AA meetings. I went to meetings drunk and high. I just really couldn't figure it out. And at that time, my wife kicked me out of the house. I go home, go back to my mom's place, and just try to get away from the city. And we get a phone call that my wife's in labor, and so we rushed down to Indianapolis. I had been sober about a month because I was locked up in Little Eden, Ohio, and everybody knew that I was a big problem and coming from the big city, and everybody was watching me in this little community. And so I couldn't go to the bar, right? The bartender knew that they weren't supposed to be serving me drinks at the Eden Steakhouse. And the lady running the grocery store wasn't supposed to sell me beer, and I tried, and she didn't. And so despite my best efforts, I had a couple of days in, and we were on our way down to Indianapolis, and man, that was like the motherland. I was really itching to try to get drunk or high, and we stopped at a gas station to get some gas on the way down to Indianapolis, and I reached in my mom's purse, and I took some money out of her wallet, because I wasn't to be trusted with anything, and made a couple text messages, and walked in the hospital, and there was the dope man waiting for me, and made the quick pass, and the shit was in my pocket, and my wife at the time was in labor, and I watched my son being born, and once again, me and her and my little son laid in that bed, and we cried and we cried, and we knew. I hadn't seen my wife in over probably 2 or 3 months. And here we are laying in this bed with this new baby, and I knew my life was going to be different forever, and that this is what I was meant to do, and this is why I was here. And we laid in that bed for about 90 minutes and just had a wonderful time. And I was excited again to be alive again finally. And I got up out of that bed and went right into the bathroom of her delivery room and started smoking crack cocaine. And then I went back to my mom's place. Everybody was absolutely disgusted with what I was doing and how I was behaving and the choices I was making. So I go back home, and once again I get another 30 days of sobriety in, and just by force. I mean, my mom's taking me to meetings, and I'm not allowed to drive. My truck's there, but I can't be trusted with it, and so I was starting to get bored, and I got some money from my mom to go over to Bryan, Ohio, go to the Walmart, maybe get some car soap and wax and some Armor All, because I'm a real neat freak about my vehicles, and maybe that would kind of pep me up a little bit, let me go kind of clean out my car. I was really excited to go do that, spend the whole damn day just detailing my truck. Sounded like a great day to me. And when I went into the Walmart in Bryan, there was a liquor store, one of those drive-through liquor stores that they have in Ohio. And instead of turning left into Walmart, I turned right into the liquor store. And I handed her that 20, and she gave me a case of beer. And I started pounding those beers, and I knew I was in trouble. I knew it was going to be bad, but I hope it wasn't going to be that bad. And I rushed my ass straight to Angola, Indiana, and went to an AA meeting. And I was supposed to be home quite a while ago, but I drove to Angola. I went to the meeting because I knew I was in trouble. And of course, I was about half drunk, and I was really nervous and apprehensive about being in there. And so I was one of those guys that went to the meeting, and before they even got all the readings done, I left. I got back in my truck, and I started driving, and I went over to somebody that I knew, and I started drinking a bunch of whiskey over there. I knew, oh my gosh, I was like, oh my God, it's so late. I got to get back home, back to my mom's house. She probably has all my shit out in the driveway. It might be on fire. I'm supposed to be home a long time ago. I'm going to come home drunk. I'm in trouble. And I started driving home. And I was like, are you kidding me? As I'm driving home, my truck is sputtering. And I'm like, am I out of gas? Are you shitting me? It's really late at night. And I looked down. I still got a half a tank of gas. And when I looked over at the speedometer, my truck was pegged out at about 100 miles an hour. And that's when you hit about 100 in a truck, like it cuts the ignition off. It prevents you from going any faster. So I must have just had my foot planted on the accelerator, and I was just hitting about 98, and then the truck would shut off. It'd coast down to 95, then it would turn back on. I'd hit 98, and I wasn't out of gas. And I came up to a curve on US 20, and I was going way too fast, and my truck yelled out into the other lane, and I hit another car going head on. His name was Patrick Bowman. He's 57 years old. He was a DNR officer, and he was on his way to his second job to work as a security guard at a gas station. He's working a second job to save money so him and his wife could go on a canoe trip out to Idaho that summer. He died instantly. Neither one of us had our seatbelts on. He was going about 50, and I was going about 90. And if you've ever heard enough of these accidents, you know the drunk usually lives. And I was really, really hurt. I got extracted out of the vehicle. It took them a couple hours to get me out. My ass had actually slid right up underneath the dash, and the engine came through the firewall, and the exhaust manifold was right against my rib cage. I had broken my legs and shattered my kneecaps, broke my hip, broke my back, shattered about 20 teeth in my mouth. I had a lot of injuries. I don't really remember too much, but I remember being in the hospital, not knowing I was there, and my dad's got a real distinct voice, and he said, yeah, he died. And my brain started racing, and the first thing I thought about was my son, who I hadn't seen since the day he was born. And I was like, oh shit, did I have Harrison in the truck with me? And my heart sank, and I didn't know what was going on, and I couldn't open my eyes. I was just coming in and out of all of these surgeries that I had had. And then there were the police, and about a week later, they told me what happened. So I had a lot of recovery to do. They didn't press charges right away because they wanted to do that accident reconstruction stuff. And I had been out of the hospital, and I was struggling to stay sober. And I had never really been in trouble before, and I knew I was in some big shit this time. And so doing the only thing that I knew how to do to deal with that type of pain and fear is I started to drink and use again. So here I am, out on bond for a DUI that resulted in death. And I don't get one, but I get 2 more DUIs. So that night I got the second one. I had just made a choice. I mean, my heart was already in absolutely horrible condition with how I felt about myself and what I was facing. And I just knew at that moment, I didn't get arrested and put in jail. They actually let me go on the second DUI. They just OR'd me. And when I walked out of that jail, I just knew that the world was just going to be a better place if I just wasn't around. If I could kill somebody and get 2 more DUIs, and I was already scared to death of what I was looking at, I can't even imagine what the judge is going to do to me when I actually get sentenced. And so I tried to commit suicide. And I'm not going to go into that right now, but it didn't work. The extension cord broke. And that was on Mother's Day morning in the middle of the night. And my mom picked me up from where I was at, and we went to the jail, and I said, I want to revoke my own bond. I need locked up. Like, sir, we can't do that. They're like, I'll just spit on one of you, you know? And they're like, don't do that. Let us call the judge. So they called Judge Wheat on Sunday morning at about 8 o'clock in the morning and said, we got this crazy son of a bitch out here that needs locked up. And they said, go ahead and put him in. And that was May 26, 2006. That was the last day. That's the first day of my sobriety. So let me tell you this. Prison was no joke. A guy like me with glasses and education, never been locked up. I had a hell of a time. I was in a pretty rough prison over by Chicago called Westville, and it was rough going for me. I refused to join a gang. I didn't have any protection, and I got in a numerous number of fights. I really got really good at fighting, I can tell you that. But they ended up getting me. 3 guys jumped me and stabbed me and collapsed my lung. And I was in the infirmary for a while. Because I was getting ready to get out. And everybody was mad about that. So they thought they might be able to get me to stay or to make sure that I never left. But I made it out of there. And part of my plea agreement was I had to go to 18 months of work release. And that was probably what really saved my ass, was that structure when I got out. And on top of that, I believe, I don't have proof of this, but I maybe have the Steuben County record for the number of community service hours ever assigned to a person out of one case. They gave me 400 hours. And so as I was in work release, I joined Habitat for Humanity and started building houses for people that needed help. And that type of community involvement and getting involved in AA meetings, it's like what I wanted to talk about with the judge, right? It's not something I would have done, right? But going to AA meetings was better than sitting in jail. So I went to as many meetings as I could, right? And pounding nails and hanging siding and putting in windows and painting kitchens was a lot better than sitting in jail, so I did it. I didn't have the willingness, but y'all provided me with enough pain and suffering that I was willing to do it. And that's the key part of what we're trying to talk about here today. But that gave me the willingness to go out and put myself in situations that I wouldn't normally did. And I started to make some really good friends in our community as a result of those community service hours and as a result of going to AA meetings and meeting good people and hanging out with the winners and scared to death to go back to prison. Not really something that we were really hearing a lot here this morning, but I'm telling you, the first 5 years of my sobriety, when I had really tough decisions to make, like when I was walking up the steps to the bar, right? One of the things that prevented me from opening the door was I knew, absolutely convinced that I was going right back. I'm not saying we should lock up every alcoholic and drug addict, right? I'm just telling you that pain and suffering was real. Pain is a hell of a deterrent, right? We don't got to break everybody's arms, but I got my arms broke, and I wasn't going back to that. So working, getting a job, being gainfully employed, checking myself back into jail every night, kept me sober long enough. All those community service hours, going to meetings, working the steps, having a sponsor, getting some sponsees, getting involved in the community, helping other people out, beginning to pray on a regular basis, right? All of those things allowed me to stay sober long enough that I started to see the miracles of sobriety happen. I hadn't really seen my son since I had been locked up, and his mother hated my guts, rightfully so. So I tried to have these supervised visits and all this stuff, and it was a pain in the butt, and it was 3 hours away, and I didn't have a driver's license. And as a result of starting to do the next right thing, she seen that I was doing the right things. And so I started to have some more visitations with my son. And pretty soon, when he was about 9 years old, she said to me, "Steve, as a mother, I've taught my son everything I can teach him as a woman. I teach him how to love, how to be respectful, how to be kind, how to be considerate, how to be helpful. But he needs his dad. He needs to be a man. And I'm asking you if you're willing to finish raising our son." So here I am, paying a lot of child support and back child support, doing all these things and doing the right thing. And Harrison's thriving. And she makes this jump of faith to let me have a chance at having a real relationship with my son, and we did it. In 5th grade, he moved in with me. I took full custody of him. She was paying me a lot of child support now. She had a very successful career. And I started raising my son. And dude, that became my new focus and my new mission. It took over my entire life. And so I had to figure out, what am I going to do to get this kid to grow up to be a man? And so I'm like, well, the first thing we're going to do is start working, right? And he loved riding his bicycle. But I took him to some open gyms. All I knew was sports and athletics to help develop discipline and things like that. But his mom never had him in basketball or football or soccer or anything like that. So he didn't really know. I took him to some open gyms, and he didn't really know how to dribble a ball, couldn't throw a baseball. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But I couldn't get him off his bicycle. So Fort Wayne, Indiana's got a BMX track. My mom used to take us there when we were little punk kids. I took him down there and I put him on his bicycle and he rode around the track, and within 3 minutes he wrecked and the skin was off his knees and the handlebars hit him in the throat and he couldn't breathe. And he jumped back up and got right on his bike. After he knocked the dust off of him, he kept riding for the next 2.5 hours. And that was when he was 10 years old. And he loved racing that bicycle, and I loved taking him around. And so we started racing around Indiana, and then we started racing around the Midwest. And Harrison was pretty good, so we got more and more into it. We started to go to some national races. Next thing you know, we're in Louisiana, Minnesota, right? North Carolina, Wisconsin. We're all over the country almost every weekend racing his bicycle. Me and him spending all that time together in the car and at the track, and I just loved it. I was his coach and his pit crew and, everything, and we just had the best times together. Well, he had done well enough when he was 12 years old at some nationals that he got invited to the Grand National on Thanksgiving weekend in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that Thanksgiving weekend, there was 130 some kids in his class, other 12-year-olds that got invited to the Grand National. And so as they start racing, they start knocking kids out. until it gets down, because there's only 8 kids allowed to race at one time, and they get all the way down, and oh my God, Harrison made it to the main event. And in just 2.5 years, right, he went from a kid that couldn't even pedal around the track to at the main event. And dude, I was so nervous. I can't stop moving. He's up in the gate, and I'm just shaking, and the gate drops, and he takes off out of the gate. And he's doing good, but he's not in the front. And a little opportunity happened right at the end of the race, and he made a big move, and he won the race. He became national champion, the fastest 12-year-old. And it was one of my proudest moments of raising him and some of the accomplishments that he had. And we raced about another year, and he decided to put the bike up and picked up his trumpet. And he started playing his trumpet with the same excitement that he did on that bicycle. And he's a junior right now. He's dually enrolled at Butler University and Purdue University, where he's studying mechanical engineering and music performance. And he's got a full ride scholarship and is doing well. And it's just one of the fruits of being sober, is having an opportunity to be involved in Harrison's life. And I don't think without that relationship, we talked a lot about the parenthood and how many alcoholics and drug addicts love their children. They just need an opportunity to actually be involved in their lives. AA has done for me, has provided me with an avenue of helping people, of being people's sponsor, of helping people move from one apartment to another, to being their shoulder to cry on, to take those phone calls when life gets hard. It's one of the greatest blessings of a 12-step program, is the opportunities that come your way. And those opportunities of serving people is, I believe, what God wants us to do. God calls us to serve one another, right? God talks to me through you people. And unless you develop those relationships with those people, you're going to miss out on developing. I don't believe it's possible to develop a relationship with God sufficient enough to solve all your problems unless you're connected with people. And it's absolutely critical. And it's one of the problems with alcoholism and drug abuse, is that most people isolate. Maybe not at the beginning like me. I love being at the bar, raising hell, talking with everybody. But towards the end, right, I'm in the basement. Right? I'm in the basement with my bottle, right, and my crack pipe, and I'm hiding, and I'm isolating, and I'm away from the world. So we need to provide opportunities. We need to have instances where we get out of our own comfort and start to connect with people and help one another and start to bear the fruit that God has for us and the wishes that he has for us. That's our main, I believe it's our main goal in life, is to make other people's lives better. And as a result of that, our lives become better. But it doesn't make sense to normal people, right? That whole idea that in order to keep it, we have to give it away. Okay? 99% of the people outside of recovery say, if I want to keep it, I better lock it up and hide it, right? But people like us, people out there that need help, right? They need to experience those things and realize that that's what life is really all about. It's where the idea that, you have to live it to believe it comes from. It doesn't make, and thank God recovery doesn't make sense. Because if it would have made sense, I would have figured it out a long time ago. I tried for years to get sober and never could, right? And it wasn't until my ass was on the line and I didn't want to go back that I was willing to try some different things. Right? And it's unfortunate, but a lot of times the pain is necessary. right? A lot of times the pain and discomfort is necessary for us willing to do what it takes to get things done. I see it all the time. I see it all the time, how unwilling people are to save their own ass, right? The things in recovery they're not hard, but they're not easy. And the amount of time it really takes every day, one day at a time, to just do the next right thing, right? And to go to a meeting, maybe work on a step this week, just this week, not every day. You know, maybe spend 20 seconds in the shower saying a prayer every morning. It doesn't take much. But we have to be willing to do it. And we need those daily reminders that that's what we need to do. And I believe that's why being involved in the 12-step program, right? I have a really good forgetter. I forget things. I think it's my disease trying to convince me that I'm not an alcoholic and a drug addict. So I need those daily reminders of what it takes every single day. So I've been sober almost 20 years. And the first 10 years of my sobriety, I was convinced, right? Unlike my employer who pays me every Friday, right? No matter if I got a lot of stuff done or not, I get the same paycheck every Friday, right? It hits my bank account. Whether I was a great employee or a shitty employee, I get paid the same. Well, my other employer, God, right? He writes a check every week depending on what I actually did this week. And I was convinced the first 10 years of my life that I was actually earning God's graces by helping people, right? By serving people, by giving people money and rides and opportunities and food and chairing meetings and being involved in the community. And what I realized, and the most important message that I want to finish up with, is that means that the grace and the love that I'm getting from God is based on the amount of work I'm doing, and that those gifts are limitless. And in the last 10 years, I've realized that God's love for us and the opportunities we have to grow are absolutely boundless. And all I was doing by helping other people was staying in God's light. I was staying out of the shadows and staying in the light. Serving people, loving one another, being kind, being grateful, helping out as many people as I can, and I stayed out of the shadows. Thank you.
All right, so we have time for some questions, and we're getting the microphone. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone to you. Oh, yes, yeah, no, you're gonna, yeah. I'm getting told instructions. It's such a powerful experience, it's hard to get your thoughts, right?
I don't have a question. I just want to say I'm a friend of Bill's too. I have 28 years, and I truly believe that you do have to give it away to keep it, and that bottom is absolutely necessary for change. And that was just, you choked me up, and it was an amazing story, and that's great that you're doing what you're doing today. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. You know, I just wanted to say that when life really gets hard, I have this big pit in my heart as a result of Patrick Bowman's death. And it was a while ago when would Jesus do? Bracelets were really popular. And so I kind of made it my own. And it's not that catchy, but when life gets hard, I just remind myself, did Patrick Bowman die in vain? Right? Because I'm trying to do everything I can to make sure somebody unwillingly died so that I could live. And that is a debt that I'll never be able to pay. I don't want to pay it, but I'm going to work my ass off and do what I can to make sure that I can honor his death.
I'd like to thank you for your message and the honesty with which you spoke. And I think there's a thread here listening to the judge that she mentioned that in the courts, that's one of the things they preach. And the program that Steve keeps talking about, the AA, that's one of the things we talk about, that to get better, we have to start being honest with ourselves and others. And so there was a very much a connection there between your message and what they were saying.
And that's one of the hardest things with honesty, right? We are so full of shit that we don't really know the truth from the false. We believe the narrative in our head, right? The crazy spin of why you drink 2 or use 2 if you had to live my life, and all the stuff that we say and all the excuses that we give, right? It takes some time. It takes some structure. It takes some commitment. I'm lucky as hell that I have a very supportive family, right? My mom's here. One of my sponsees is here. One of my great friends is here. My fiance is here. My sponsor was going to be here today, but he has to have heart surgery this weekend. But, that's the amazing part. That's the community. That's the connection. That's the accountability that I think that people need in order to recover.
So I understand outside of the prisons and the jail time and stuff, there's places to go. Do they have like a place that they can set up and have like AA meetings and drug meetings at the actual facilities?
Like actually in prison and jail?
Yeah.
Yeah, they actually have meetings inside the jail. They had meetings inside the prison. One of the things that got brought to me when I was in there was a program called Celebrate Recovery, right? And basically a Bible-based version of AA, which that's what AA is. That's what the 12 steps are anyway, right? But since we're so screwed up, we don't like the concept of God in the Bible, so we had to make it pretty vanilla so people would actually read the damn book. But Celebrate Recovery was a great program that was brought to me, and I really pay a lot of homage to that program and try to do what I can to support it. But, yep, there are meetings in prison. But like anything in prison, there's a lot of sick people in there, right, that don't really have any desire to get sober, right? They just want to get out of their cell for an hour and raise hell. So, becomes a little bit chaotic, but there'll be a few people in there that want to be serious. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Stephen, for sharing your story.